Hey guys, what's up? Matt here and welcome to another video. This one is all about teaching you what a frame is and how we can then, I guess, use that as an anchor point to where you can control a sales conversation far more effectively. This is for sales professionals who want to, I guess, learn how to be able to take someone through a sales conversation kind of like IKEA and not Walmart, if that kind of makes sense. It's a set path, we know where it's going. That rope can go anywhere off the anchor point, but it's always got to go back to that. So make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and yeah, I'll see you in a second. Cue the intro. All right guys, so the way that I think of frameworks within sales conversations is in a couple of different ways. And I'll give you some analogies to start off with so that we can kind of, I guess, get the correct context. I look at a frame as like an anchor point for the conversation, and the conversation can run in like a bunch of different ways, and that rope can kind of go anywhere at once, but it always has to go back to that final anchor point. The other way of looking at it is kind of looking at it as like an established known, right? So it's the context for the rest of the conversation. So in order for that conversation to have congruence throughout it, and for like, you know, it has to make sense. And so when we look at that anchor point or that established known, that becomes like the point in which all decisions have to be made based off that fundamental truth, which is why people with fundamentally, culturally, whatever, very opposing viewpoints rarely have very productive conversations, right? It's why debates kind of divulge into madness and just people digging in on their own viewpoint rather than really productive lines of conversation, because there's no common ground that's being met. So how does this work in sales? So what I want to do is give you an example, and then that's going to make it easier in order for us to kind of, I guess, see how it affects us day to day. Let's say that we're selling something like coaching, or we're teaching people how to start their own business. So we're teaching them to go from an employee into like a business owner. So that could be a biz op, it could just be coaching. There's plenty of different things that we can do with that, and it's quite generic. So I would start that conversation by setting what I would call a transition framework. So this transition is what the rest of the conversation will hinge upon. It's the single anchor point. So I would say something like in the beginning of the call, I really love working with people who are kind of making the transition from employee to business owner. It's a really rewarding time because business owners and employees, they think differently, they act differently, they make decisions differently. And that transition into, I guess, kind of backing yourself and I guess taking more risk is a very fulfilling time, and I really enjoy working with people as they transition from one to the other. Does that make sense? Yeah, sweet. Okay, so what we've done is establish the word transition, okay? We've also established that there is a transition that has to be made, and we've got agreements upon that, okay? Which means that we've now set our anchor, we've set our framework. Anchoring of transition becomes very important because what we wanna do is we know there's a transition that needs to be made in order to come from where they are into a business owner. Then we take all of their goals and then we anchor all their goals and future pace them out, but we tie them to being a business owner. Okay, so like, because if they could achieve their goal with what they have, they wouldn't need anything else. So right now we've established that they cannot achieve their goal with what they currently have. And then we talk about their goals, and then we sort of tie that into becoming a business owner, of which they need to transition to become. What this does is it takes the conversation away from buying something and towards doing something, right? Because there's a big difference between the two. Like, not many people enjoy having conversations about buying things, but people are more than happy to have conversations, especially if it's like a non-salesy conversation about like, let's talk about the actions required into getting the outcomes that you want. And so these frameworks become incredibly effective tools in taking it away from sort of a sales conversation and just a conversation about what actions are required to get the outcome. Now, by anchoring transition, we know there's a transition that needs to happen. And so in order to get their goal, they have to make the transition. They have to learn the skills required to be the person that can actually achieve the success that they want. Now, the logical step, given the framework of the conversation that you're having, is to buy the program which gives you the skills. But that's just that's one step in the process. There's a whole bunch of other steps that need to happen. But step one is get the skills. It allows us to really have a much more pleasant conversation with somebody, because we're not really talking about buying something. We're talking about just doing actions required to get outcomes. And if we are able to establish these transition frameworks or congruency frameworks, whatever it is you want to do, then it makes it a much more pleasant conversation to have, and it makes it far more easier for the person to buy at the end, because they're not buying just a product or a service. Like they're starting the process of becoming the person which they need to be in order to get the outcomes that they want. It also allows us to really use that in our objection handling, because like, let's just say they go, I really need to think about it. Oh, this is a bit scary, whatever normal, objection you're gonna get at the end of each call. You can make that objection as a normal part of their mental transition from one to the other. And so it's like, well, I'm glad that you're kind of said that, because frankly, if you weren't a little bit scared about making this transition, then I'd be worried, because this is a big deal. Okay. And so what we want to do is really talk about what are the things that need to happen in order to put yourself in the best position to be able to transition into being the business owner, so you can actually achieve your goals. So like that fear, what you're feeling right now, and that hesitation to move forward is exactly where you should be. But the first step is overcoming that. So do you want to have that conversation? Do you want to talk about how we can potentially overcome that so we can actually get you on your way? And so it normalizes all the objections, and so it makes that conversation far easier to have. Okay guys, that's how I can use frames, or how you can use frames in order to steer a conversation. If you do want to learn more about that, you can head over to the website, salessniper.net, and we have some resources there for you. All right guys, thanks very much. Have a good day. Bye.